What's everyone, this is Coach P. We're just going to go through some of the movements that we use here at Trainology. We've got a progression that we like to use with all of our movements, our patterns that we look at in our workouts and how we program for you guys. And so this pattern that we're going to go over today is just a squat pattern. All right, so our squat, everybody thinks that we're looking at just building up our legs, quads, hamstrings, glutes, but really we're looking at a full body movement. So this is exactly how we go through our progression for the squat and getting people from maybe a base level up to the more advanced levels like using barbells and things like that. So number one, on our squat, we'll start people if they do not have the ability for a body weight squat with what we call our box or a bench squat. And so you can see I've got the bench here, and we'll set up right in front of their arms out. That's going to help with some core setting. We'll reach forward, and as we sit to the box, the goal is to keep the torso upright. Once we've gotten a good amount of strength there and control for that upper body with that squat pattern, we'll move on to our body weight squat. And so on a body weight squat, we've got something very similar. Arms out in front. That's going to help that core setting. Torso upright. Let the hips sink. And we approach what we call depth, or somewhere near parallel. We just want to have a nice hip crease that's near the height of our knees. And so there's our body weight squat. What we can also do is, if we have something like our rings that we'll use in our workouts, we can use those and kind of skip over that box squat to help with just grooving that squat pattern with just using the lower body. After our body weight squat, what we'll do is get into what we call our goblet squat. Now our goblet squat is our first weighted squat, okay? And so with the goblet technique, we'll hold the weight somewhere near our chin. And we've got two ways to rack this. So number one, we can hold the kettlebell by what we call the horn, or the top of it, the handle, or we can flip it into our hands if we've got a little bit of work to do on the upper body for managing that kettlebell. That weight in front of us provides a nice counterbalance. So this is a good progression that we have once we can start moving some weight on the squat. If we're holding by the horn, we like to use a cue called separating, or ripping that horn apart to hold that in place. Notice on the squat that we want to try to keep our knees in line with our toes, keep them from falling inwards towards each other or excessively going outwards. So that's our goblet squat. After our goblet squat, when we have gotten the core strength and some capacity built up with our shoulders, we'll go to what we call our front rack. And we can do that with one kettlebell or two kettlebells. Now, these kettlebells here are 12 kilograms, about 26 pounds. And so we look at this as an easy benchmark for getting up to what we would do with our barbell front squat and back squat. So in the front rack, we're going to set the kettlebell in this space that we can create in front of our shoulder, keeping the torso upright. Knees can follow the toes. And so with that one kettlebell, we can challenge one side. Obviously, we'll have to switch to the other side and train that as well. But then once we're ready for the double, kettlebell on each side, keep those fists underneath the chins. And the technique is still the same. Torso upright, knees follow the toes. We want to make sure that we don't let those kettlebells fall as we squat. Drive those elbows up and hold the position. So then after we've gotten through our kettlebell front rack, and remember, we use that benchmark of 26-pound kettlebells, or that 12 kilogram, because two of those together will give us about what we need for a barbell. We'll go ahead and start teaching that barbell squat. And we like to go with front squat before back squat. And the reason why is because we have to have that proper setting of the core. When we squat, and what's typical is that back squat, people get into that position with that bar on their back, and we see a lot of what can become shear in that low back, and a lot of of that arch position. And that's just because we don't have the core strength, the prerequisite strength built up to manage that barbell effectively and actually squat with a perfect pattern where that bar can travel straight up and down over our center of mass. So we'll teach front squat before that. Now on a front squat, we have to make sure that we have some good shoulder external rotation. We have to have some good wrist mobility as well if we want to achieve that full front rack. And that's going to definitely be for people that like to do Olympic lifting, and performing things like our cleans and exercises like that. Now, if you're not performing any Olympic lifting, you could still get a good front squat done just by crossing the arms to rack that bar in position as well. Main things with this, make sure that you keep the elbows up, whether you are going full front rack or you're just crossing at the shoulders. We don't want to let those shoulders dip because that bar can start to slide off of our shoulders. So on the front squat, like I said, we can go full front rack or cross the shoulders. On front rack, elbows can come inside a little bit narrow of the hands. Make sure we drive those elbows up. Chest stays up. But what happens in our lower body is the same as our beginning movements for our squat. Knees follow the line of the toes. Chest is up. Notice with that, I'm not looking up, which is a common cue for a lot of people with a squat. But we want to set the eyes straight forward. Gaze straight forward or slightly down, and it usually allows people to manage their balance pretty well with the squat. The other front rack position, crossed, which if we don't have that full front rack, that's okay. We can use something like this. Just make sure to keep those elbows up. And squat. After our front rack kettlebells and our front squat with the barbell, we can then look at a good barbell back squat. Why? Because that is the most challenging to manage with the squat patterns. So with the barbell back squat, bar can sit up on our traps or it can sit a little bit lower across the shoulder blades for what we call our low bar back squat. Now, for the most part, people are probably going to be high bar squatters. If you are someone that squats low bar, you're probably more so looking at the strength needs, high strength needs for a back squat, maybe your power lifters or something like that. On the back squat, we still also need adequate shoulder mobility so we can get back, retract those scapula, and get over that barbell, okay? Now, what happens often is we get into positions with that barbell if we don't have the shoulder mobility, and we'll see people let that bar rest in their hands. Not a great setup, especially as the loads get high. The weight can be tough to manage. So we use the recommendation of just extending the hands just wide enough or as what's comfortable for those shoulders so that we can get a nice firm grip on that bar, lock it in place on your back, and knock out your reps. Here's your high bar back squat. Notice the bar is up a little bit higher on the traps. Technique's still the same though. Knees follow the toes. Eyes straight forward or slightly down. For a low bar back squat, notice the bar's gonna be just a little bit further down on the shoulders. Usually you have to bring your hands out a little bit wider for this, but if we're looking at moving the most weight, this is probably where you're going to need to be. So there's all of our squat patterns that we'll use here at Trainology, and that's just so look at some of our progressions and regressions that we'll use. Remember that with that squat, yes, we are training lower body, but really it's about everything that's stacked up on top of that. So remember, train hard, train smart. We'll see you guys.